there's a greater soul, so think of all life, and then that soul breaks into many, and then there's the individual soul expression. One theory I've heard is your soul could be expressing through this physical body and another physical body in the 1500s and another physical body. And so we could be experiencing the past, present, and the future simultaneously.
Welcome to the New Age Human Podcast. I'm your host, John Astasio, and today we're talking with Laurie Rivers, who is a consulting astrologer who helps professionals and entrepreneurs navigate the changing times while aligning with their highest potential. So stick around to the whole thing because here's some highlights. An awakened story involving quantum entanglement and time travel, the topic of reincarnation and the soul's journey with cosmic influences, and at the very end, we talk about and elaborate on her predictions of the likely and probable future events based on her expertise in astrology. Before we begin, we have a Telegram channel where we discuss topics mentioned in the show, and more importantly, sharing the topics that are of most interest to you. And if you want to contact me, just go to newhagehuman.com. Let's get to the show. First of all, thank you for coming onto the show. This is awesome because
My pleasure, John.
We were talking earlier about your in-depth knowledge on astrology, and then just before, I just had to hit record because you're like, I had my great awakening or greater awakening story with your quantum physics class. So let's dive into that. What is that story?
Oh my God. So one, I never got to be asleep, just so you know that. I never had the luxury of not being aware. I was a weird kid. I started reading it too. I could see my quote unquote guides. Much like Sheldon Cooper, my mom had me tested, so I know I'm not crazy. We were kind of joking beforehand. I was like, if Amy Farrah Fowler and Sheldon Cooper had a baby, that would be me.
From the Big Bang Theory, for anybody
From
who,
the Big Bang
who hasn't
Theory.
seen that yet.
Right. And anyway, I was an international relations major. I went to university in England. And in fact, it was Hogwarts in the second film. So I've been to Hogwarts, which was a major flex for my children. But it was famous for having The Wall filmed there when I went to school there. So, that was very cool.
The
Pink
Wall.
Floyd's
Can you
The Wall.
elaborate on that?
Pink Floyd's The Wall. You know, we
Oh,
don't
the
need
music.
no
Okay. I'm like, what wall?
education. That wall.
Okay.
But anyway, one of the reasons I went there is whereas I'm very good at conceptual math and experimental math, when it comes to writing out calculation, I have dyscalculia. So I can plan trajectories in my head, but I cannot write them on paper.
So
and I only had to take...
What's
Go ahead.
dyscalculia?
Dyscalculia is kind of like dyslexia, but math.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah. And so, but they didn't know what it was back then, right?
Huh.
So I could give you all this great theory out of my head, but I could not write it down. So in order to get through my degree, I needed a science class and a math class. And I was studying with world famous international lawyers. And that's what I was focused on. I was a U.S. Middle East policy specialist when everybody was looking at the USSR. This was back 88 through 90 because I did my degree really fast. But anyway, I saw this science class called Natural Sciences. And I was like, oh, biology. I can do that class. And I get in and there's this very tiny old woman named Dr. Troller. And Troller she was. She welcomes us to the class. She was Austrian by birth. And she said, welcome to quantum mechanics theory.
Oh, perfect. She has the
And
accent, everything.
Right? Everything. And my hand shoots up and I'm like, I'm a humanities major. I would like to be released from this class because I was a scholarship kid. This was a very expensive school. These kids were billionaires' kids, millionaires' kids. My dad was a firefighter. Okay, so I was there because I was smart. But I'm like, oh, excuse me, cannot lose my GPA. I'm like, I cannot get anything less than a B+ right now. And she was like, I don't let women out of my class.
Oh,
shit. So after class, I went to her office and I am like in heaving tears. I am 19 years old. I cannot afford to get a B or a C at this point because I already got my C. I made an economics professor angry. Actually, I made him cry, but we won't go into that. But it was kind of funny. But anyway,
Oh, you're
I
making
go
this
and I'm
so hard.
explaining.
Go ahead.
I was explaining to her, my hardship and what have you, and she didn't say a word. She rolls up her sleeve, and there's the number tattoos on her arm,
Oh,
which means
was it pie?
she served. No, it was an Auschwitz tattoo.
Oh,
You can't argue with that. And I was an international relations major. History was part of what, we dove into. And I just stopped crying and went, oh, crap. And she said, you said you were a classically trained musician. That was one of my arguments. I'm a musician. I'm an analyst. I'm in my head, but I'm not that good at math. There's engineers in this class. I'm going to lose on the bell curve. And she said, can you imagine smaller than small? And I said, yeah. And she was like, can you imagine bigger than big? I'm like, of course. Because I used to do that in high school. My mom used to think I was on drugs. I'd lay on my bed and I would imagine the Big Bang and I would imagine the force going out and expanding infinitely. And my mom would hear me go, whoa. And she'd be like, let me see your eyes. And I'd be like, I'm just blowing my own mind. But anyway, she said, use my office hours, but I'm not letting you out. This can change your life. And it did. No one had, this was 89. This quantum physics was not a common discussion topic. You didn't have TV shows about it. Stephen Hawking was barely a known name. And I'm not going to lie. I think I cried more than I've ever cried in my life taking that class because my brain literally hurt. The more I read, now everybody talks about Schrodinger's cat. Nobody had ever talked to me about Schrodinger's cat. I grew up in Gladstone, Oregon. It had like 8,000 people.
So for those that don't know what that is, can you do like a side description of
so Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger's cat. It was postulated, and this has to do with particles and or subparticles, which they've proven at the CERN particle accelerator, that something can exist and not exist at the same time, and it's based on perceptions. So Schrodinger had this theory that he had a cat in a box, and it was both alive and dead at the same time. Go ahead and read the theory. And I remember reading it over and over. It's alive and it's dead all at the same time. You open the box and it's alive. You open the box and it's dead. You open them and I'm like, my brain was just flipping on this. It was just like, how the hell does that work? And trying to understand, like everybody, when in 2012, when the Higgs boson was actually proven, right? And they call that the God particle. It's not the God particle. Higgs called it the goddamn particle because he couldn't find it. But when he published his work, they made him take the damn out. So people make this, especially in conspiracy theory land. Everybody's like, it's the God particle. And it's like, no, it's the goddamn particle. That's what Higgs called it. Okay. I'm like, if you want to do your own research, people, go do actual research. Don't just read Wikipedia. Okay. Just don't. It's not a primary source. There are things called books. We can read those too. But it was very exciting in 2012. By the way, I was on Twitter that day when it got announced, and Higgs was alive to see his own theory proven, and that was really cool. But it was through this understanding of like a particle, and I just remember seeing this in the book. I can still see it in my head today. It was a little description of like, on this side of the universe, a subparticle that is charged in exactly the same way as this other subparticle on the other side of the universe could resonate and communicate across time and space. And something clicked in me in a way that I don't know how to describe with words, but my brain changed forever with that. It made sense. I had already left my religious background. Not, funny enough, because I didn't have a faith, but because that faith wasn't being followed in the institutions. And I was like, you know what? If you're going to be a good person, just be a good person. Don't do it for brownie points. If you're going to help people, just help people. Don't do it for brownie points. Don't do it to be seen as virtuous. And so my whole goal was studying, like, even though I specialized, because you had to specialize in something at the school. And so mine was U.S. Middle East policy. Everybody thought I was crazy because nobody cared about the Middle East back then until 1990. which I predicted, and not as an astrologer. So I was already a political analyst, right?
Mm.
But I knew if we could communicate better, if human beings could learn about perspective. The reason I went overseas to study, even as an 18-year-old, is I knew if I studied here, I would only be taught through the American set of lenses. Like, so I wear glasses, right? So my lenses are set. I wanted to see it through another kind of lens. And I'm a true internationalist, which is different than a globalist, right? As an internationalist, it's understanding everybody's human and we all have different cultures. We may not see eye to eye, but if we can communicate, we can collaborate because we live on a floating rock in space. It has finite resources and
Got
we
it.
might want to take
Some
care of
people might
that.
say flat Earth, but I just
Oh,
I want to say that to see your face for anybody who's watching. Well, we don't have to go there.
you
I
don't
just
want to
wanted to
go
throw
there.
it in there. Um,
Everyone is entitled to do whatever they will. I'm sure they've done their own research.
as a true
So,
internationalist would say, right? So basically, we went from Schrodinger's cat. I hope
mm-hmm,
I'm saying it right. And then
mm-hmm.
you got triggered, or you got a greater away. Something
An
happened,
unfolding. Yeah,
and
my mind just blew open,
that's
wide open.
technically quantum entanglement.
Yes, that's what they call it today. I don't think it was called that back then because I think
Oh,
string theory might have been in its infancy at that time.
interesting. Okay.
So, yeah. So by the time the Big Bang Theory hit television, then everybody talks about it. And I'm like,
You're like, wait a minute.
really? I've been trying to talk about this with people forever, and everybody thought I was crazy, So, and I didn't study it as a scientist, I studied it as a layperson, but it helped make sense of experiences I'd experienced metaphysically. It made time seem interesting because I had some experiences as a teenager as an
Let's
exchange
dive
student in
into those
Europe.
experiences. I'm like, you're like, oh
They were
yeah, I
pretty
had these
weird.
amazing experiences.
I
So
did. And it's funny because a lot of people, when they hit spirituality, they want these things. I want you to understand, I never wanted them to happen. So at 15, I was an exchange student to Belgium, and my host mom was an old countess. Okay. She was 76 years old, and her name was Comtesse Gabrielle Delanois. Okay. Delano. She had letters from Eleanor Roosevelt that I got to read, which was really kind of cool because I was kind of a history nut at the time. She took me on a road trip to France and she took me to see Normandy and Brittany, which was like when you see like Omaha Beach, that put things into perspective. That's one of the reasons I wanted to study international relations is you could still see, like we went to the Ardennes as well in Belgium, and you could still see the scarring from the tanks, from World War II. And this was 85, it was 40 years, which is really scary. We're approaching 40 years from that. Damn, time goes fast.
time travel.
Right? Time travel. So I could feel certain amounts of things there, but I was also very emotional because I was a young woman and, I was easily, I was a crier. What can I say? And yeah, we went through this medieval town. And as we were going down the road, I smelled smoke and it was heavy and it was thick. And then I saw smoke. Like it was like you're walking into like a forest fire area almost. And it was acrid and I'm coughing and I'm sputtering and nobody else is. Tante Gabby wasn't, her girlfriend that came with us, Tante Dion, and I don't mean girlfriend. I mean, like, they were friends.
Right.
Tante Dion, she wasn't, nobody was around me, and I am coughing and hacking, and my lungs are burning. And I turn and I look, and there's kind of this outline of a crowd, because it's thick smoke, and there's a pyre smoldering. And Tante Gabby, I'm like, don't you smell this? I'm like, what is wrong with everybody? And she looked at me and she said, oh la petit Jésus. which means, oh, my little Jesus. She was Catholic. Um, this is where Joan of Arc was burned, and we were in Rouen. And I was like, that's creepy. And all of a sudden, everything clears. There's a church in front of me because they built a church on the spot, and it's kind of shaped like a boat. It's a postmodern thing. But when I did research later, because we think when people were burned at the stake, they were burned alive. They didn't. They died of smoke inhalation because it was a hay fire that dampened. And so you died from smoke inhalation. And I did that research when I got home to the state.
Wow.
And so I thought that was weird. And it was something I didn't talk about with people because I did not want people to think I was weird. I was 15 years old.
Right. You're a 15-year-old walking around. Just, did you know?
Right. Hey, by the way, I had this now kids might talk about it today, but you talk about that stuff in the 80s. You didn't talk about
True.
anything in the 80s. If it was weird, you did not discuss. You were like, nope. It made you vulnerable to getting beat up. So I was like, not today. So when I was in college, there were a couple of other experiences, like I could feel hands on me, or I could see something like buildings or something in an area where there weren't buildings or different buildings. And I would be like, am I going crazy? Am I schizophrenic? Is there something interesting, with my mind? And when I learned about the two particles, I was like, well, maybe there's some people, and given I have bad vision, I'm not stuck with reality like everybody else is, right? If people have really good vision, this is my theory, I may be completely wrong, but my theory is because I have less than perfect vision, I was born with less than perfect vision, I've always been able to see energy. Like I spent an entire day trying to read up on auras, got halfway through a book and went, oh, I already do that. And I thought it was just because I had bad eyes. But
Right.
it's not. It's just there. And I don't think it makes you special. I don't think it makes you better than anybody else. I think humans are designed to do this. And for most people, it requires a catalyst because if your senses are quote unquote normal, it makes it easier, right? Or harder to see these things that seem unimaginable. And so why wouldn't you look at people as prophets or spiritual leaders if they had these other really big abilities? They're not. I think everybody can do it. It's just some people, because there is a deficit in one space, end up having it not be in another space. I don't think it makes you better.
I do have a theory.
Oh, I'd love to hear.
So let's say some people don't. I think majority of the circles that I'm around believe in reincarnation. Okay. And I believe you're on the reincarnation side of things, especially when it comes to astrology.
Can be. Not 100%.
So let's say, you go and you have multiple lives. And as you go from one life to the other, you elevate yourself as a soul to higher levels of capability of consciousness because you're learning. And then it's like a mixture of both where you get reincarnated and let's say you're at your soul is advanced to a certain degree that when you reincarnated, the reality around you had to formulate to establish the physical body in a way that would accommodate that type of high frequency. And it could be by way of toxification of the body, where you have a heavy metal toxification in the mind that makes connections where there wouldn't have been. But it had to be that way because the DNA, the spirit, the soul of the person had came into this reality around this time, and it's like, all right, you got to make this thing work,
right?
Because and then reality's like, all right, well, we're gonna have to give you, not so good eyes because we got to make space for you to see these other things because you ended that last life being able to accomplish so much with that, and you're gonna. The agreement is you're going to continue with that. So, we're going to sacrifice a little bit and give you some vision in other areas.
Well, and the cool part is if you're born with something, it really doesn't impact you all that much. It bothers other people far more than it does me. I adapt just fine.
Right.
So, and we have the technology to have Coke bottle glasses. So, it works. But I don't think you're wrong. I mean, first of all, nobody can prove any of this. So we can have to always theorize. If you've ever read Seth Speaks, that presents some, and this is from the 70s. Okay. So you might want to look it up.
Well,
It's a little mind blowing. I found it in my great grandmother's box of books after she passed away when I was 11. I did read it, but it scared me and I put it down. So I had to read it later. There was a creepy picture of her, of Jane, the person who channeled Seth. And it was really interesting, but it's mind blowing. And it kind of prepped me for that class, the little bit I did read. And they talk about there's a greater soul. So think of all life. And then that soul breaks into many. And then there's the individual soul expression. One theory I've heard is your soul could be expressing through this physical body and another physical body in the 1500s and another physical body. And so we could be experiencing the past, present, and the future simultaneously.
quantum entanglement.
Exactly. And I believe very firmly that quantum entanglement is very much a real thing. It makes much more sense than I was born a super special person to be a messiah on this planet and save people, because that sounds crazy.
Right, but and you are also at the mercy, or the ego tends to be inflated with that, and so it's almost like when there is someone that has accomplished or has the ability to do so much amazing things, they have to go through hell.
Yeah.
Usually what I've seen happen, like
It's close. Yeah.
like it balances itself out.
It more than balances itself out. And sometimes I think we have these gifts, or like we call them gifts, but abilities, I think is a better term, to survive some of those things. Because when somebody says they've been awakened their whole life, they've usually gone through some shit. And I have. It gets better though. You don't have to continually go through it, by the way. You can finally get up and out.
No, I agree.
And astrology was a vehicle to help analytically understand these things. To give myself data sets to play with. It gave a container. It wasn't as open-ended. Neither is it deterministic the way I do it. I don't think fate exists. I think we can play with fate. I think fate is a great way to hand your power away.
Yes. And then I know about the concept where before you're born, you decide what trajectory you're going to go towards. So you have certain parts in your timeline that you agree to happen because you want to accomplish XYZ goal. But in between those points of events, you have free range. You can be led astray from that event, let's just say, that you wanted to have happen, and the further you go away from that event, the more, I guess, quote unquote, hell you go into, as far as like the balancing effect. That's something that I saw as, I'm like, oh, that's one way to think of it, because I've heard plenty of stories of people, and I see her face. She's got that like, I don't think so. But I'm just saying this is a theory, and what are your thoughts on that?
I think we have to be really careful and understand that evangelical Christianity has permeated almost every part of our culture. And whether you were evangelical or not, or conservative Catholic or Lutheran, those ideas, because Calvinism is at the basis of our American society, okay? And so this idea of crime and punishment and reward and brownie buttons from the universe is something we have to be careful of. It's a constant deconstruction, at least in my case, because when we say the words like astray, you're off your path. I don't think you're ever off your path. Your soul is getting experience. Like, think of it like a giant game of D&D. Okay. Sometimes you'll roll a 1. And it's just a 1. You didn't roll a 1 because you're a bad person.
I've never played that game, but I'm pretty sure like a low number is like not good.
Yeah, 1's really bad. A 1 is you dropped your sword. Okay. Hang on a second. Let's see if I can.
Oh no, we're pulling something out. Or not.
I was gonna get my dice, but
you have specialized dice, I'm guessing.
I do. there's a 20-sider, okay?
Oh, those
So
are nuts.
they're crazy. And if you roll it and you roll a 1, let's say, and you're fighting with a sword, you drop your sword. That's a 1. So occasionally we roll a 1. Sometimes we roll a natural 20. And that's like, woo, those are those peak experience days. I don't think we're getting grades on this planet. First of all, think about how petty that would be on a universal scale. Like if the universe is infinite and has infinite intelligence, why would it care what a singular human being did on any given day?
Well, you would care on your growth as a being to become more.
But what does growth mean? Are you morally judging yourself? Are
Yeah,
you
based off
more?
of your stuff. Yeah.
Are you morally you really are. You're really going to be like that. Or are you going to say, I'm learning and I'm growing?
Which is a great way to think. And I believe that each person is fixated on a certain way, and it's like you create your own path based off of what
Mm-hmm.
you're fixated on, when you can just
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm just learning and I want to just
Mm-hmm.
experience and then
Mm-hmm.
become more, whatever that means, because I'll know as I become more. You don't know
Right.
what you don't
Because
know
your
until
job
you
might
become
be to
something.
be a jerk in this lifetime. That may be the mission, is to be what everybody else thinks is a jerk. Because we're
Right. And
here to
I've heard that plenty of
experience
times.
everything. Yeah. So I can tell you from personal experience, when I came from a place of looking at life as right and wrong and duality, good, bad, the binary existence, okay, treating life like it was a set of binary code, right? Life was a lot harder. When I came to a different understanding, and it was like I'm learning and growing, and it is an experience, and I can course correct to be more comfortable. And I don't mean self-satisfied as in like comfortable in comfort zone, but just like, hey, if I keep doing this thing, I keep banging my head into a wall and that hurts.
Yeah.
This hurts less. Life got easier. And so when I came from a space of moral judgment because of religious training and cultural training and being raised as a girl, where there's lots of social expectations on being good, the fear of, in fact, I'll argue that virtue is our greatest shadow, that need to be seen as a good person, that need for people to be like, like when you were a little kid and somebody was getting in trouble and there would be another little kid going, I'm not like that. I don't do bad things. And
Right.
you'd beat them up
Yeah.
afterwards. Right? That's shadow. That's ego. The desire to be seen as virtuous. And the more that can get deconstructed, where you're just like, I'm human. It doesn't give you license to go out and be a jerk, right? Because the more you self-actualize, the more you're going to be self-aware, the more you're going to be like, that's maybe not the best thing to do today. That's probably going to have some consequences I don't want, being aware of consequence, but not holding yourself to the space where you fear an outcome.
Yeah.
Because I think that gets in our way, and it that can hold us back. Sometimes we have to take a little step and trust a process and not worry about how it works out.
So you said that you may have some predictions on what you think could possibly happen in our near future. And would
Mm-hmm.
you care to share that?
Yeah. 2023, 2024, 2025 are all very, very volatile years. They continue to be volatile because what happened in 2020 was the basis of the world as we know it is the foundation has crumbled. Okay. So everybody expects an apocalypse to happen all at once. I don't think we're going into I think we've been living in an apocalypse over the last 40 years. Okay. I don't think we haven't been. Water quality, air quality, what's happening in the oceans, the toxification of the planet, toxification of food sources. How is that not the apocalypse? But what we're watching is thankfully a slower decline than I thought it would be 20 years ago when I was looking at these charts, because it scared the crap out of me 20 years ago. I had little kids. But I don't think we're going to lose technology. So number one, I don't think we're going to lose tech. I don't think AI is going to take over. I don't think it's going to kill us. I worry about corporations misusing it, but I don't worry about AI itself. Okay. I worry more about human motivations. You've got to grow your own food. It is not going to get better. And I've been warning about this
Can you
for
repeat that?
decades. Grow your own food. You may not be able to grow everything. If you live in an apartment, you can still grow things hydroponically. Okay. It doesn't take that much electricity. Okay. Make a budget. And I know that sounds elitist, but it's a lot more elitist to say go eat worms.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you probably don't want to eat the worms in the dirt at this point.
Hey, there's speaking of electricity, there's been a uptick in maybe it's my algorithm, but an uptick in YouTube videos of people showing you how to create an earth battery.
Oh,
So
cool.
that is something that I think the patent for it was in 1908. So that's how old that tech
Right.
is.
Right. Oh, we've got all the technology we need to
Yes.
live sustainably on this planet. And the oil companies have been squashing it since they could.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, grow your own food. We're not going to lose currency, so I'm sorry, all of you guys who want fiat to go away. It ain't going away until Pluto's in Taurus, and that's in 2135. So sorry, guys. In our lifetimes, we're going to be dealing with currency. So you want to be sustainable there. Don't think your corporate job is going to keep you safe. It's not. The more entrepreneurial you can be, and the more you can pivot. Don't bitch because a chatbot took your job. You know what? Guess what? Horse-drawn carriages. Not a lot of jobs in there either now. The flint napper. The flint napper. Everybody needed a flint napper back in the day. Do you know what that is? That's
No, I'm sorry.
somebody who made arrows. The
Arrows.
arrowheads, that's called napping. Okay, so they'd nap obsidian or they'd nap flint for stone tools. That went away too, guys. There's people who do it, but not very many. It's kind of niche. Although knowing how to do it might be useful. So you want to grow your skills. I am a 54-year-old woman. And if I have to build my own damn site and code it, I can. Do I do that? No, I use platforms. But can I? Yes. Keep up to date on your skills and adapt. Don't bitch about the state of the world. Adapt to it because we're about to change excessively rapidly. Also, be very careful about being caught up in the outrage machines through the media.
I like that outrage outrage
Mm-hmm.
machines.
Mm-hmm. That's to keep people busy and distracted. I'm not saying don't be involved. In fact, I'm going to say instead of focusing on federal elections, I would look at your local elections, who's on your school boards, who's on your water board, who's, if you have public utility districts, who's involved in your planning commissions. You can be involved in those meetings. Go to your town halls because the people who are involved are the people who make the rules. As we move forward closer into 2025, the need for collective action is very, very important because it's going to be a 20-year run. And I think we end up in 20 years looking a lot more like a Star Trek society. I don't think we're going to be out in space. I think we need to take care of this planet. It would make more logical sense. But I think we're going to be more collaborative and understand we have differences. We may not see eye to eye, but we can have good conflict resolution. And I think that's where we're heading. Unfortunately, it's going to take a crisis point, and that crisis comes through climate. And I don't care how it got started. We can argue all day long about how it started. I don't care. The fact remains weather systems have changed. I don't care what the source is. We're dealing with the effect. So you want to be able to adapt and change with that, whether it's how you live in your neighborhood. We have to communicate more with one another, and we don't have to go tell other people how to live necessarily, but we have to be understanding that if we don't collaborate in some way and cooperate instead of fighting over resources, well, the more we fight, the more losses there's going to be. And I think we're going to see a lot of people die in the next 5 years to floods, droughts, not just in the developing world, which obviously they're at the greatest risk, but also in less well-developed parts of this country due to, again, storms. The wheat harvest globally failed this year.
Not
Italy
surprised.
Yeah, Italy has a pasta shortage, guys.
McDonald's
Hello,
can't make French fries, guys.
right? It's not just ice cream machine that's broken now. And so there are simple things you can do to make yourself comfortable. Don't doom about it either, though. Pardon me for being an Xer. We were raised for apocalypses. We're just like, okay, roll up your sleeves and do it. But I think the whining I hear, and I know this sounds really intolerant, but I'm getting over a cold, so like my nice filter is gone. We need people to stop whining. I'm tired of hearing people, oh, I'm tired of historic times. There hasn't been a person on the planet who hasn't lived through historic times. Have you read a history book? Ask your grandma, ask your great grandma, hold a seance if you have to. Let them tell you. My great grandmother didn't have wrinkles on her knuckles because of washboards. So cry about hard times. You got a washer and a dryer. Thank God for that. Yeah. And she wasn't poor, but that
That's
just was life. That was life. She sang to her washing machine. She was born in 1899.
so if you
Okay.
don't want to have wrinkles, just wash your clothes
Just wash,
manually with your
yeah, on a
face.
washboard, right? I mean, they were smooth. So I think people need to understand, yes, it's kind of scary to go through this kind of change, but you've been living in an artificial reality anyway. It wasn't ever natural and normal for human beings to go into offices. And it wasn't normal and natural. 100 years ago, it wasn't normal and natural. Okay. Only a few people did that. Most people were agrarian 100 years ago. So I don't think we all have to go back to the land. And if you've ever gone, I've done that. It's not for me either. I'm a tech geek.
Back to the
But
land, meaning like a homestead type of
yeah,
situation.
homesteading where you have to drill your well, but go grab your water from a bucket. I mean, come on. No, that's a lot of hard work. Little House on the Prairie sounds fun until you're doing it.
I like the idea of a hybrid of both, where you're connected
Yeah,
to the land with technology that allows you to
100%.
continue being comfortable, right? Learning from the past so that you don't have to, you can
100%
have wrinkled
understanding.
knuckles.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there's some great examples out there understanding permaculture. Again, as an astrologer, and I know I didn't talk a lot about astrology on here, but honestly, I'm kind of excited about it because I do a lot of other stuff besides astrology. I help people work on these plans, like if they wanted to do something about that, like how they could do that specifically for them. But you will need to know a lot about a lot of things to be a good astrologer because every symbol in that chart represents 100,000 different things. And so the more you know, the better you can interpret. And
Makes
so if
sense.
somebody wanted to live off grid, I'd be like, you don't do well in the middle of the plains. You would be happier in the forest. Or somebody else would be like, you know what? You're going to feel claustrophobic around trees. You need to be out in the Great Plains. You can do an earthen structure where you don't have to worry about tornadoes. That would be, instead of saying my idea of how to live, I'm looking at what works best for the person.
Interesting.
But although I don't get a lot of people like that, but if I did,
You're
that's what we
prepared.
would do. I'm prepared. I'm ready for it. But
That's
yeah.
funny. So, two things that popped up. One, you said currency is not going away as far as fiat.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
does that include, as far as what's staying, crypto? Because that is a currency as what it's being
You
used
know,
for, but there's so many different
well,
usages.
yeah, crypto is really interesting because it is a currency. Like people, I've been around the Bitcoin bros for a long time, and I'm like, it's still a currency. Sure, no, they treat it both like a commodity and like a currency. So if you're exchanging it for something, guess what? Currency. Shells were currency once. Um, just saying. But anyway, pardon the sarcasm. But next April 25th and 26th, Jupiter and Uranus are conjunct. Crypto could blow all the way up and hit a peak and go like Bitcoin could go right back up to 64, which it doesn't look likely right now, right? But it could. And I think that is the possible, or it could completely wipe out. It's hard to know because when we're talking about Uranus, otherwise known as Uranus, and the reason I call it Uranus is because of the Uranus jokes. And yes, they're funny, but
I'm
we're
trying
on,
really hard not to laugh right now.
right,
I'm
right.
serious.
I can tell, right? It's kind of a wild card energy. I have, because there was a while where I was doing like crypto predictions for my patrons, right? And so I invested, right? I'm not gonna give a prediction about something I don't have any skin in the game. So I don't do stock predictions because I hate the stock market and I'm not gonna play with it. So I don't want BlackRock to have more of my money, or Vanguard. But I invested what I would have spent on lunch when I was working back in 2020 when we went to work from home. I just put the money I spent on lunch into crypto and I actually did pretty well. I'm holding it right now. I don't have that much in. I'm just holding. And because I have a feeling it may jump, notice I'm using conditional language, it may jump April 25th. Otherwise, I'd sell it because it's been, not doing well. And I do feel we have a billionaire war going on. So, and it's being fought. Those, what they call the whales, I think, are fighting it out. And, you have to be really careful. Don't listen to talking heads, and that could include Elon Musk, whatever. Because they're very self-interested. So when they're trying to hype you up on something like Doge or whatever, don't think it's for your benefit. Okay, ever. They would not be billionaires if they cared about other people's benefit. Okay, those two don't work well together. So be careful with that. I know, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are Elon Musk fans, but he's not that.
Let's just hope there's a change of hearts.
She's
like,
I've looked at his chart. It may not be his job to have a change of heart. It may not be his job to care. It may be his job to be doing exactly like again, I may not personally be fond of that person's personality, but from a spiritual perspective, there's no judgment on my end. There's no judgment on most people that people don't like, even axe murderers. That may be exactly their job. You don't know why. You don't know what agreement was made. You don't know. It doesn't mean I have to like it. It doesn't mean I think they need to go without consequences in the physical plane. But from a spiritual perspective, nobody can give an answer as to what purpose it served. And so I think when we moralize and we try to project our idea of morality on the universe, it's a very slippery slope.
It's always going to be skewed. It's always going to be skewed.
Yeah.
Man. Oh, man. I'm like, there's one question I wanted to ask because you're talking about climate. And yes, there's lots of things that are going on, bad things, climate-wise, and it's increasing. And there is that thought and understanding with cycles of a solar flare. I know someone might have mentioned it. And it's one of those things where you're like, technology is not going anywhere. A solar flare can really damage technology.
Yeah, it might be down for a while, but if we don't get rid of it forever, it can damage it.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean,
that's why I have spare computers. I have computers that aren't turned on. I purchased tech in 2021 knowing that the chipsets, which, by the way, chipsets were already in trouble pre-pandemic because I worked in that industry. I worked in the hardware industry.
And you already knew what was going on. So
I
you
already
have extra
knew
chips?
there was, well, I have extra machines. So, and they don't get turned on. They're sitting there. They get turned on once in a while. Just make sure they're booting up. But yeah, I probably have 4 machines.
I can totally see you putting it in a Faraday cage.
I don't, well, yeah, one of them wouldn't fit in the microwave if I had to put it in there, but it's a 17-incher. So
some aluminum foil, you know?
Right. Just cover it over. But to be honest, I think we have bigger fish to fry if that happens. You need to understand how to read maps. I worry about younger people lacking life skills. I taught my kids all those skills. I taught them how to use a compass. I taught them medieval skills, whether it was using a hand spinning yarn, whether it was on a drop spindle, or a spinning wheel, how to make fabric, how to cook, how to hunt, how to forage. And that was up in the Pacific Northwest. I live in Southern California now, and now I got to get books on it because I don't know what's edible here.
Yeah, foraging. I mean, I'm surprised you went as far as making your own clothes.
It was introduced to me. basically, if you have the opportunity to learn something, do it. And I'd always wanted to do it, and I learned how. And once I understood what went into buying fabric or making fabric, I was like, well, that's really important to learn. You can make rope, you can spin anything. And so it also taught my kids an appreciation for, and they're adults now, but just for what you're wearing on your body, how
Yes.
things are made, the processing of it. Just like you think, some kids think milk comes from the store. People just buy clothes, but you don't realize what goes into growing cotton or making cotton into thread or, sheep's wool or what have you. And so teaching my kids how to do those things, people thought it was a little nuts. But they have a ton of skills that are transferable. They're quick to learn. They're able to pick up technologies at all levels. Woodworking, just learning.
And that's
learning how to do a lot of things.
And that expands the mind too. You're talking about
Mhm.
appreciation. You're talking about just
Mhm.
a mind expanded into, because if you know where things are and then you know what it used to be like, you can also slingshot into where it could get to. Just because in a short period of time we went from doing stuff by hand to now not even being aware of how it's made. You can only imagine what the future is going to look like. Yeah, we spoke about a couple of really good topics. So I'm
Right.
actually glad we went and just flowed with it. And it's interesting how we
real.
went with like metaphysics, quantum physics, like just questioning stuff. That's awesome.
I had a good time. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Is there anything that I want to close out and give you a chance to kind of share if there's anything that you're working on, that if someone's trying to look for you and they liked the conversation and want to know more about you, go ahead and share if there's anything you want to share.
So you can find me on TikTok. I'm at Astrology, and that's kind of more entertaining astrology. I do political predictions mostly there because that gets people's attention, kind of sets me apart. Again, I've been an astrologer since 95. I know, long time. She's old. But I also have a podcast called the Awake Space Astrology Podcast. And I kind of give weekly updates to keep people aware and prepared, and kind of tell you how to kind of surf the cosmic tide. Knowing astrology will never prevent or make you immune from events. You can dodge some serious bullets. It basically allows you to travel probability much easier because we have possibility. That's everything. We got probability as a narrow field, and you can avoid some of the less pleasant probabilities when you have that understanding. And I try to just keep people informed. And that's pretty much where I'm at. My website is wokeastrology.com, named on purpose. So if you don't like that word, that's just fine with me.
and the fact that you're just being yourself and you're just kind of going for it, that's what I appreciate. And I like how we introduced the name of that website at the very end, because we went through a lot of topics and perspectives that are like, they're on a very deep level that I know people that wouldn't like the name woke astrology, but they would love the conversation that we have. So I know that we've got some people with question marks, floating above their heads like
What
the
the
Sims.
hell? Yeah.
People are deeper than you would think.
Woke is not a new concept. So first of all, it started in the 60s. So it's not a modern term.
And just terms in general have different meanings for different people as well. You use it and someone's going to say yes, someone's going to say no, and have like back to the filters. So very cool stuff. Thank you again for coming on. This was awesome.
It was my pleasure.